All right, today is October the 23rd, 2017, and we are here with Mr. Duncan. Now, Mr. Duncan, when and where were you born?
I was born in Oklahoma City, St. Anthony's, third floor,
That's where I was born.
on January 27th, 1924.
Wow. What did you do prior to joining the service?
Well, prior to going into the service, I was active in high school,
Mhm.
junior high, and even in grade school. And even early in grade school, I knew what I wanted to be in the first grade. I wanted to be a cartoonist.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
And that all happened when I remember I had a student friend named Ralph Seaman who wore a white shirt, and we were in poster painting class. And Ralph asked me if I would paint an airplane on his shirt. He dreamed of flying, and so I did. And he spread his arms and flew around the class. Miss Moore came in, our first grade teacher, and was horrified and took us both back to the cloakroom in those days, got a ruler out and paddled us very good.
Just for that.
So our aeronautical society, our aviation company, was grounded immediately.
Just because of that. Wow. When and where did you join the service?
It was in the, I was 19, and I was sworn into the service in about late July or early August of 1943. And down here in the courthouse in Oklahoma City. And then went immediately to Fort Sill for a while, and I'd say less than 2 weeks, and then finally assigned to a fort in Texas. It's where the famous rose gardens were.
Really?
They exported roses around. It'll come to me.
Wow.
But one thing that I remember about having the indoctrination and medical, two things I remember. One was that here in Oklahoma City was that after they would vaccinate us on both sides with different shots for this and that. And I remember I was called back, and I said, what do you need to do now? And one of the medics there of the Army said, I want my needle back. And the head of the hypodermic had come off into my arm. The second thing was they began to issue clothing. And I remember I got a $36 raincoat. And
$36.
Which was a regular, yeah,
Wow.
which fits me pretty well.
Yeah. And that was a lot of money back then too.
Huh?
That was a lot of money back then too.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, the guy in front of me was shorter, and he looked like a dwarf. You know, where one of Snow White's dwarfs.
Uh-huh.
And the guy in back of me was wearing a jacket almost with that raincoat. He's a big, tall guy. So that were two experiences in my. And then at Fort Sill, I remember we were taught immediately to salute an officer, and I remember with my hand in my bag of popcorn that he suddenly appeared, and I threw popcorn all over him, you know, and he didn't crack a smile until on down I glanced over my shoulder, and there he was, laughing.
Really? Wow. But wow.
Let's see. I'm still trying to think of the fort where I was for then 10 weeks, and was assigned into the eventually into the Army Specialized Training Program,
Mm-hmm.
where I was then sent to the University of Cincinnati to enroll in engineering. Uh, and the idea was that we would be joining the forces overseas at a somewhat later date as engineers.
Mm-hmm.
But then Patton began to lose a lot of men, and that whole program folded after 3 months, at least in the sector I was in.
Mm-hmm. Wow. But do you remember when you first got shipped over to France?
Yeah, I do.
Mm-hmm.
I had been in England for orientation and preparation to leave from Southampton via one of the troop ships, and then be subsequently then climbing down the netting of the ship into LSTs.
Mm-hmm.
By that time, the critical bombardment and all that was over.
Mm-hmm.
Our troops were on the other side of, had gone through Normandy
Mm-hmm.
at great loss. Even though ultimately I was in battles where we lost more men than Normandy.
Mm-hmm.
We did, by several hundred. But I remember that, and I remember especially from coming down the netting where I didn't have a good grip on my rifle, and it crashed into the LST below.
Oh,
Fortunately,
no.
it didn't hit anybody.
Mm-hmm. So we were able to get your
And
rifle.
we had full field packs on. We were just loaded to the gills.
Mm. Yeah, I can just imagine being packed down like that. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But where did you first see combat at, and when?
And it wasn't very long
Mm-hmm.
that I was in, but in the combat zone, first of all, is where we were dug in, just beyond Nancy, somewhere between Nancy and Guebling, Guebling,
Mm-hmm.
France, that sector. And I remember where the cook, as we dug in, he said, Hall, why wasn't I born short? And I said, I don't know, Slim. He was from Texas. He said, whenever I dig in, I either have my head in and my ass out, or my ass in and my head out, and I can't win.
Exactly.
You're lucky. And you know, there's something true about that, because these big guys presented more of a target for the Germans.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, but they almost like human flesh in tank form,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and were very vulnerable. Now, where they did score was in their strength to be able to do some
That's right.
things.
That's right.
But I remember that after several days in that staging area, and then being lined up along the periphery of a force,
Mm-hmm.
I still remember seeing my first German dead, had been frozen into death.
Frozen.
It was he'd been hit, but his body was leaned against a tree, as I recall, and was just stopped, and it was cold,
Mm-hmm.
and more or less in a frozen state. His papers were scattered around, and I looked at some of them, and he had a wife and children, and all that stuff, and and I thought, how senseless this can be, you know.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So I probably was in a combat zone no more than 5 or 6 days at the most.
Really?
Wow. I was a replacement.
Mm-hmm.
And Patton was losing so many men that I still remember that of sleeping all night. Oh, previous to that, we had foxholes where we were two in a foxhole
Mm-hmm.
because the Germans would slip through, and you probably know this better than I, drop a grenade in your foxhole and get two for one explosion.
Mm-hmm. Wow. But so how long after that were you injured?
Uh, After that, several days, uh, um, and there's one night that I can't even account for. How I survived, I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
It was because the next day, on the uh, on the 18th of November, I remember we were trying to take a position behind a railway incline
Mm-hmm.
because the Germans had right on the top of that um, a pillbox which no longer exists.
Mm-hmm.
Just been in touch with the 26th Division. Whatever appeared to be a pillbox to me,
Mm-hmm.
it might have been the French were great hunters, and it could have been a site for hunting
Mm-hmm.
birds and whatever.
So I guess the Germans had a machine gun nest up there.
They did, and they had other uh, places around, and I've actually seen. We were trying to get up to the incline behind, so that the machine gunners couldn't hit us,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I still remember on the right flank. I still remember to this day about a U.S. pilot in his small plane that carried a few bombs of dive bombing
Mm-hmm.
some of the open plain German machine gun positions
Mm-hmm.
beyond the railroad on the right. Uh-huh.
Wow.
And I still remember seeing the Germans leap up, grab their machine guns that were on a tripod,
Mm-hmm.
and flee. I mean, really race for their lives.
So you could see them with your naked eye.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good.
Wow. So you're that close. Wow.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
And then that's where you got. You said you got shot in the hand, correct?
Yeah, I was carrying a man.
Wow.
Uh-huh. That we just had come under fire the second day of the heated battle,
Mm-hmm.
and that morning we came under mortar fire. I've seen grown men, one in particular now that comes back to me, big strapping guy, begging not to die. Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
And this is natural.
Mm-hmm.
Probably had Patton been there, he would have probably slapped him like he did
Mm-hmm.
the one. And I can understand battle fatigue.
Yeah.
And it just it's horrible.
Mm-hmm. Wow. But do you have any favorite memories of while you were in the service? Like any?
Well, some of them are humorous. I remembered after I was hit, why I was flown to England. Oh, by the way, the man that I was carrying, I never knew his name,
Mm-hmm.
and he was a big, heavy guy, and I could only shuffle him along on the battlefield,
Mm-hmm.
and never knew his name, and got him over into a safer area.
Mm-hmm.
By that time, I was bleeding pretty badly, and realized that I couldn't continue bearing that weight.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got him in a safe place, and then located medics from our side shortly thereafter and pointed out where he was,
Mm-hmm.
and he was saved. And I still remember seeing him one day, shortly after I'd been operated on,
Mm-hmm.
that he waved at me in line, and I knew he was on his way either to England, probably there, or to the States.
Wow.
But getting back to the time that when I was in England, why I was in a hospital not too far from Torquay in Devonshire, and there I got excellent care. And I remember that one day we were moved out of the hospital into a tent, which had I think a board floor and a small coal stove. And some of the men had located the hospital kitchen, and at night were taking bread, and we had a little ceremony there of talking into the night, and with coffee, and we had the bread. Man, that was just really living it up.
Yeah.
And we had an officer one time came in and said, "Man, somebody's been taking bread from the hospital kitchen, and it's got to stop." Then he said, "What do you men feel? You're acting like this is a hotel." And I'll never forget a guy in his cast up there could hardly move, and he said, "That's right, sir. We wish the room service was better."
Oh my.
Uh-huh.
Did he get in trouble for saying that to his CO?
And not that I know of.
Wow.
Then I had a Nurse Brown. I looked so young that she would give me a kiss every night on my cheek because I was really helpless, you know, in the cast and all. And she was transferred out of there shortly
Oh no.
for too much affection to men. I looked like about 15 years old.
Really? Wow.
Uh-huh.
And you were what, about 20 something years old
I
at
was
the time?
20 years old.
20 years old. Wow. But when you think of war nowadays, what do you think about war nowadays, like you know what's going on now compared to what was going on back
now
then?
with the ability to have the drones and target and all kinds of infrared scopes, we had it somewhat then.
Yeah.
I didn't have one on my rifle, but it wouldn't surprise me that maybe with your research, I think the Germans were more advanced in scientific scopes than we were. But anyway, now it's, and we can kill so many people at one go.
That's right. And you know, with all these nuclear missiles and
I mean,
what?
just wipe out a whole town.
Wow.
Yeah.
But
It really concerns me with North Korea, with some of the provocative statements by our president, that it could set this guy off, that he could take out Guam or maybe Seattle, you know, depending on how advanced their science is.
wow, that's crazy.
And we're really playing with fire when you have people still, if you'll pardon me, still in their adolescence ruling countries.
That's right. And yeah, and North Korea is like a little child almost, like.
Well, he is he's an infant.
That's right.
Playing war games with real lives.
That's
and just kind of like the little war set that comes around, and I don't think he realizes what can happen. Humongous devastation. But previous to that, what could happen, like in Seoul, I've taught in Seoul and have given lectures there, and they're great people. South Korea.
Yeah, believe it or not, I'm actually a quarter Korean. Believe it or not, I'm actually a quarter Korean. My grandma, she's from Busan.
Oh, I'll be.
Yeah, and
I've been down over in that area.
And her brother was actually in the Korean War. He was a student in Seoul at the time, and the North Koreans came in, and they forced him in the North Korean army. And he was just 16, 17 years old, so you know he had to.
Well, I'm close to the Koreans.
Yeah.
And I've been given an award to go over, and by a group out of Atlanta some years ago, where my student went over. My wife was invited, no cost to us, to live for short times with Korean families, and really got to know them and appreciate them.
That's amazing.
And one of the problems too, again, not that our greatest generation was all that great. They were segments of it that have children in these countries,
Mm-hmm.
uh, either by visiting houses of prostitution or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember seeing Korean teenagers that had been rejected by their American dad, who already had a wife over here.
Mm-hmm.
That's a reality of the war.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt so sorry for the Korean women. And but even with that was feeling sorry for the kids
Mm-hmm.
that were being rejected by
Their father.
by both societies,
Mm-hmm.
having nowhere to go. And
That-
our Methodist Church jumped in
Mm-hmm.
to try to care for them.
Actually, my grandma can relate to that. She actually married a Korean War GI, first off, and she was shunned from her family because of that. So she's like, and she was like 18 at the time. She's like, you know, she you know, people in their teenagers are usually kind of rebellious. So she went back to the United States with him, and they kept out of contact for 10 years when they finally invited her back to Korea to see her again. But it's
Uh-huh.
quite crazy, you know, the difference in society.
Well,
that-
yeah, and this is it happens in all societies.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I studied in China as a student after the war,
Mm-hmm.
I got a scholarship to China, exchange scholarship. That a member of our faculty had married a Chinese, and boy, listen, the kids were having a hard time being accepted in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember talking with him in faculty meetings at Lingnam University in Canton.
Mm-hmm.
That was back when Mao was moving south and surrounding that area.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "How is it, Professor, that you feel more at home here in China?" He says, "My family, my children are treated with respect here." Uh-huh.
Wow.
And I've seen this across the board with blacks that, you know, even my family.
Mm-hmm.
I have Japanese. My grandson has married a Japanese.
Really?
And and then my son has married a Hispanic. And so somebody said the other day, "What about the African American?" I said, "Give me time, give me time."
Yeah, that's right.
But my heart really goes out to some of these people, depending on the societies in which they live. Some of it is just surface acknowledgement at times. What really happens is how people treat people in real life.
Mm-hmm.
That tells the whole story.
Yes, sir.
Like yesterday, as I spent some time in this home, that I thought I was going to be welcomed by the wife of the family, the husband,
Mm-hmm.
and she didn't even come out of her room
Mm-hmm.
right here. So that told me immediately that don't carry this too far, you know, in friendship.
Yes, sir.
I accept that. I take each situation on its own merit.
Yes, sir. Well, with you, in the recent years, you've gone back to the places where you thought.
But yeah, I have 3 times.
Wow.
In fact, when I pass on, some of my ashes will be taken to the battlefield where I was hit and where I saw so many men die. Wow. That's just one place. My ashes will be taken to to South Africa, where I served as a missionary. Also to the scout camp out here. I was very active in scouts, both as a missionary in Africa
Wow.
and here. And some of my ashes will be in South Africa, Mafeking, where Baden-Powell first got the idea of scouting during the Boer War back in
The 1890s. Yeah.
yeah, I've actually been there.
Wow.
And had a brother troop from there come over to visit us, and then we went over there and then traveled over a period of about 4 weeks, various sites in South Africa with South African scouts.
No kidding. But
We've done this with Mexico, too,
Wow.
an exchange.
So you went all over the place.
Uh-huh.
Wow. But now when you go back to the battles, what goes through your mind when you go
Well,
there?
it just said, I think the first thing that comes in my mind is to let uh, and by the way, the French in the villages almost worship us as saints, and I wish they would not do that, that we're just brothers in arms,
That's right.
and let's celebrate our presence with one another with love.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
And whenever you go back to these battles, do you ever encounter former enemies? Oh,
Well, not really.
really?
Where I was, uh, a lot of the people there have died,
Hmm.
you know, and um, but I'm one of the last bridges to history of the Americans in that area,
That's right.
mainly because I sought them out. I wanted to find out where I was hit,
Hmm.
and a colonel of the WWII division pinpointed it exactly. Uh,
No kidding.
and
Wow.
I've been with the WWII division just to receive the medal here.
Hmm. But wow.
Uh,
Um. Well, when so what took the American government so long to finally award you what you deserve, like your Purple Heart and your Bronze Star?
well, the Purple Heart came through after a time, shortly after,
Hmm.
but I never knew I had the Bronze Star
Really?
for, I guess, well over 50 years or
Okay.
more. Uh-huh.
It's crazy.
And I think it was awarded mainly because of our uh, unbelievable losses. We had men just slaughtered, you know.
Hmm.
And from one report that I read, artillery was to have landed on the other side of the railway, and it simply didn't. I was there.
Oh, really?
Even in the report, it suggests that might have been the intention at one time, but it never occurred,
Wow. Wow.
at least in my sector.
In your sector. Well, this concludes our short interview, and I appreciate you for giving me time to talk to you, sir.
Yeah.